Jakob Nordangard. I'm a PhD in technology and social change. In this second part about UN Leaders' Pact for the Future, I will talk about the background to the planetary emergency that certain actors want to declare during the Summit of the Future next year. And what are the implications of this? First, a historical background. In 1947, the Doomsday Clock was created at the University of Chicago by scientists who had developed the atomic bomb. They wanted to convince the people that a world government was the only option to avoid war and misery. Eugene Rabinovich, editor of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, wrote, "If the world government cause is to triumph, it will need more than sympathetic endorsement by the majority. People must be made feel that their own security, freedom, and prosperity, yes, their very survival, depend on the creation in our time, the world rule of law." In 1948, the threat of nuclear war was supplemented by apocalyptic environmentalism. Two groundbreaking books by Fairfield Osborne Jr. and William Vogt were published with a dire message. The expanding global population would bring environmental disaster if not checked with birth control measures. These ideas were spread with the help of the Conservation Foundation, an organization that Osborne and Vogt founded together with oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller's grandson, Lawrence Rockefeller. They all belonged to the American economic elite. Vogt became the national director of Planned Parenthood Federation in 1951, whereas Osborne was the longtime president of the New York Zoological Society, today known as the Wildlife Conservation Society, with Lawrence as chairman. These ideas also made an impact internationally, with the founding of the International Union for Conservation of Nature by UNESCO Director General Julian Huxley. Both Huxley and IUCN were closely aligned with the Rockefeller Foundation. This was environmentalism rooted in eugenics. It meant improving the genetic quality of the human population through selective breeding. The population had to be controlled and the unfit had to go. In 1952, Lawrence's brother John and the president of the National Academy of Sciences, Detlev Bronk, arranged the Conference on Population Problems in Williamsburg with 30 hand-picked proponents for population control. One of these were the oceanographer Roger Revelle from the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. He would soon get an important role to play. The conference led to the establishment of a Population Council with a mission to develop a plan in order to keep the world's population in check. John, Lawrence, and Bronk thereafter participated in Rockefeller Brothers Fund's Special Studies Project. This project, which ran between 1956 and 1960, had been initiated by Nelson Rockefeller, with Henry Kissinger as director and the youngest brother David Rockefeller, vice president of Chase Manhattan Bank, as a panelist. The stated objective with the Special Studies project was to shape a new world order in all its dimensions: spiritual, economic, political, social. The challenge was to, quote, develop an international structure within which the basic human objectives can be realized, and then work steadily toward achieving it. This would be done through science, an area where Rockefeller philanthropy had a big impact. As David Rockefeller's sub-panel Foreign Economic Policy concluded, no field requires international cooperation more and makes its benefits more generally available than that of science. The United States should, therefore, seek to develop a series of agreements looking toward the fostering of scientific progress on a world scale, such as the International Geophysical Year. The International Geophysical Year started a process that leads up to our present day. Of special importance was scientific problems that span across borders. This could be applied to areas like global health, oceanography, and meteorology. They wrote, if it becomes possible to interfere actively in the big processes with the atmosphere, the results are likely to transcend national boundaries. Problems that will then arise must be handled on an international basis. As mathematician and Rockefeller Foundation affiliated scholar John von Neumann prophesied in 1955, probably intervention in atmospheric and climatic matters will come in a few decades and will unfold on a scale difficult to imagine at present. All this will merge each nation's affairs with those of every other more thoroughly than the threat of a nuclear or any other war may already have done. Oceanographer Roger Revelle, with funding from Rockefeller Foundation and the US military, became an early advocate of the anthropogenic global warming theory, together with Gilbert Plus from the Ford Motor Company. Their groundbreaking articles were published in the Swedish scientific journal Tellus Journal in 1956 and 1957, respectively. The Tellus Journal is a peer-reviewed journal published by the International Meteorological Institute in Stockholm. It was started by Swedish meteorologist Carl Gustav Rossby in 1948. He was a student to Svante Arrhenius, the originator of the carbon dioxide theory, and had made a rocket career at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and the University of Chicago during the 30s and 40s. Rossby initiated carbon dioxide measurements in the early 1950s and was the supervisor of Bert Bolin, but died of a heart attack at a conference in 1957. Both Rossby and Bolin were closely aligned to the Rockefeller scientific network. Stockholm would become a focal point for climate-related research, with support from the Rockefeller network as well as the Swedish government. Bolin, who would become the first chairman of the IPCC in 1988, was the editor of a memorial book to Carl Gustav Rossby that was published by the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in 1959. This seemed as an odd choice at the time. But in 2004, the One World, One Health concept, combining animal, human and environmental health, was developed at a symposium hosted by the Rockefeller University, but earlier was the Rockefeller Institute of Medical Research, and organized by the Wildlife Conservation Society, as I mentioned earlier, once led by Fairfield Osborne Jr. and Lawrence Rockefeller from the Conservation Foundation. The Conservation Foundation arranged the first international conference about the influence on carbon dioxide on the climate in 1963. Among the 7 participants, there were only 3 real climate scientists. Charles Keeling from Scripps, Erik Eriksson from International Meteorology Institute at Stockholm University, and Gilbert Plass from the Ford Motor Company. They concluded that a temperature rise of 3.8 degrees Fahrenheit could be enough to bring about immense flooding of lower portions of the world's land surface, resulting from increased melting of glaciers, and recommended a watchdog on CO2. In 1965, US President Lyndon Johnson became the first president to warn about the effects of carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuel. Roger Revelle served as his scientific advisor. The climate issue was then picked up by the neo-Malthusian environmental think tank Club of Rome, led by Italian industrialist Aurelio Peccei, that had been started with a grant from Peccei's boss from the car manufacturer Fiat, Gianni Agnelli, a close business associate and friend of David Rockefeller. In 1971, Club of Rome board member Carol Louis Wilson from MIT anchored the climate issue in collaboration with the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences during the conference Study of Man's Impact on the Climate at Svante Arrhenius' birthplace, Viks Castle outside of Uppsala in Sweden. Wilson had been a member of a special studies project and was a close friend of Nelson Rockefeller. The conference report was widely distributed at United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Stockholm the following year, a conference that was led by Secretary General Maurice Strong, with Wilson as an advisor. Strong was a member of the Club of Rome and the Rockefeller Foundation trustee. Strong got educated in matters involving the climate and planetary boundaries at the Aspen Institute in Colorado by leading scientists like Carol Louis Wilson. Aspen, that was led by oil magnate Robert O. Anderson, had been deeply involved in the preparations of the Stockholm Conference. A year later, the newly appointed US Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, called for better climate research in a speech at the United Nations. His call was heeded. At the World Climate Conference in Geneva in 1979, the ball started to roll. An appeal was made to foresee and to prevent potential man-made changes in climate that might be adverse to the well-being of humanity. This initiated the World Climate Program that arranged conferences about man-made climate change during the 1980s with Bert Bolin in a leading role. Rockefeller Brothers Fund jumped on the bandwagon and started to allocate money to climate change policy. It was a part of their One World program, and a continuation of the work they had started with the Special Studies Project 25 years earlier. One of the recipients was the Bayer Institute in Stockholm, founded in 1977 by the private Bayer Foundation and the Royal Swedish Academy of Science, with the British ecologist Gordon Goodman as the founding director. He would become one of Rockefeller Brothers Fund's most important assets during the 80s. Goodman and Bolin became a powerful duo. The Village Conference in 1985 was a decisive conference with both of them as conductors. Bolin had prepared the background paper and Gordon Goodman was the chair of the working group on CO2 emissions. Their recommendation was to A. encourage the formation of a coordinating committee to promote and coordinate research relevant to the greenhouse issue. B. Set up mechanisms for contingency planning. And C. Begin exploring the potential for a global convention on greenhouse gases. This had huge implications on future development. The Bayer Institute and Gordon Goodman was then responsible for 2 workshops that was held in Village and at Rockefeller Foundation's Bellagio Center in the autumn of 1987. These were sponsored by Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Rockefeller Foundation, and the United Nations Environmental Programme, with a mission to develop policies for responding to climatic change. Bert Bolin was a member of the steering committee. Goodman also wrote the chapter about energy in the Brundtland report, Our Common Agenda, and added the part about anthropogenic climate change upon the request and funding from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. All this work gave the desired result. After the Reagan administration and US Secretary of State George Shultz had sent a draft proposal about an intergovernmental panel on climate science to WMO, the International Panel on Climate Change was founded in 1988 with Bert Bolin as chairman. United Nations General Assembly declared that climate change was a common concern of mankind. In January 1989, just 1 month later, the Stockholm Environment Institute was founded by the Swedish government with the aim of bridging science, policy and practice. Social Democrat politician Birgitta Dahl and Bert Bolin were co-founders, with Gordon Goodman assuming the role as the first director. Offices were started in Stockholm, Boston and York. This was a political project. Bolin was a government advisor and had been a close friend with former Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme. Stockholm Environmental Institute started the Polestar project together with American Tellus Institute in 1991. We were aimed to develop scenarios for how a planetary civilization with a global authority could be achieved. They analyzed possible paths towards the new world order that RBF had envisioned in 1956. Funding came from Rockefeller Foundation and United Nations Environmental Programme. Gordon Goodman was leading the project together with Tellus Institute Director Paul Raskin. Bert Bolin served as a reviewer. This project later evolved into the Great Transition Initiative. Raskin is a member of the Club of Rome. That same year, the club admitted in the First Global Revolution that global warming was a threat that was used to unite the world, and that the real enemy was humanity itself. The Rockefeller Network had now achieved their first goal. David Rockefeller's powerful think tank, the Trilateral Commission, released the report Beyond Interdependence to set the course for the future and presented an action plan. They stated that global warming couldn't be limited by countries on their own. They had to cooperate. The next step was to develop an effective global convention on the climate. This was a part of the agenda at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, a summit led by Rockefeller henchman Maurice Strong. At the summit, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed by 154 states and came into effect in 1994. It has been followed by an endless number of climate summits. The ultimate objective of the convention is to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic, human-induced interference with the climate system. In 2003, Bert Bolin asked agronomist Johan Rockström to take over the position as director of Stockholm Environment Institute. Rockström had been recommended by his former colleague Carl Folke at the Bayer Institute. He accepted and assumed as director in 2004. A new chapter had begun with Rockström at the steering wheel. Rockefeller Brothers Fund made climate change their overarching issue and proclaimed, the warming of the climate is no longer merely or primarily an environmental issue. It is an energy issue, a business issue, an investor issue, a moral issue, a security issue, an agriculture issue, a coastal issue, a religious issue, an urban issue. In short, a global issue that touches every conceivable facet of human existence. It is a matter of universal concern that cuts across party lines, religious affiliations, class divisions, and demographic distinctions. And therein lies our current opportunity. The debate was over. At the G8 summit in Gleneagles in 2005, British Prime Minister Tony Blair declared that climate change was the most serious threat to the environment. Action was needed. Before the meeting, a position paper had been circulated among the participants with an urgent message. We have a narrow remaining window to engage global strategic planning and mobilization, followed by a maximum of 50 years to achieve the transition, to scale down resource use, to terminate inequitable capital accumulation, and to stabilize and begin the long-term reduction of global population. Author was the British government advisor and psychoanalyst David Waston, trained at Tavistock. At the annual meeting of the Club of Rome in the autumn of 2005, he advised them to declare a planetary emergency, branding excess CO2 as an ecotoxin, present strategy to take the world to zero CO2 and develop institutions for handling the transition. Earth stewardship was needed. The following year, the Swedish Foundation for Strategic Environmental Research, MISTRA, together with the Bayer Institute and Stockholm Environmental Institute, launched the Stockholm Resilience Center with a mission to advance the scientific understanding of a complex, dynamic interactions of people and nature in the biosphere. Johan Rockström was chosen as director. 3 years later, in September 2009, Johan Rockström and a team of scientists presents the Planetary Boundaries Framework in Nature. This defines 9 boundaries for human activities that will trigger dangerous tipping points if overstepped. The framework is presented at the Club of Rome's Global Assembly in October 2009 with attendance from their patron, Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, a big share owner of Royal Dutch Shell, and Mikhail Gorbachev. They are also included in Johan Rockström's and the then president of the Club of Rome, Anders Wijkman's book Bankrupting Nature, Denying Our Planetary Boundaries. The message starts to spread within the scientific community. In order to safeguard the planet, 32 scientists demand that human societies must now change course and steer away from critical tipping points in the Earth system that might lead to rapid and irreversible change. This requires fundamental reorientation and restructuring of national and international institutions toward more effective Earth system governance and planetary stewardship. The article was published in Science. Shortly thereafter, the Stockholm-based Global Challenges Foundation is being set up to achieve this. Founded by billionaire and financier Laszlo Szombatfalvy, with Johan Rockström on the board of trustees. It has the mission to facilitate the changes needed in global governance to mitigate global catastrophic risks. Swedish Social Democrat politician Margot Wallström becomes a spokesperson. They start by releasing a report about global catastrophic risks that threatens the human civilization, as well as promote the creation of networks, collaborations, and initiatives aimed at developing governance solutions and moving the conversation forward. For this aim, they also announced a $5 million award for anyone who can successfully create a United Nations 2.0. Johan Rockström continues his work with defining the aims of a global research program, Future Earth, that had been set up after the UN Conference on Sustainable Development in 2012 to advance research in support of transformations to global sustainability. Future Earth will become an important hub in the new global governance architecture. In June 2015, the Commission on Global Security, Justice and Governance released their report Confronting the Crisis of Global Governance. The Commission is headed by former US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and former Nigerian diplomat Ibrahim Gambari, and presents recommendations on how to better respond to 21st century threats, challenges and opportunities. They seek to encourage a broad-based global policy dialogue and an institutional reform agenda aimed at 2020. A few months later, the United Nations Agenda 2030, with 17 global goals for sustainable development, is adopted by the UN member states. It is followed by the signing of the Paris Agreement during the 21st UN climate meeting in Paris in December 2015. This means there is an urgent need with global institutional changes. In 2016, Johan Åkström and EASA Director Nebojsa Nakishinovic states that we must now find new institutions, new governance arrangement, and, as Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and UN Ambassador, says, new guardian angels for the global commons in the Anthropocene. At the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos in 2018, Rockström is talking about how Global Challenge Foundation New Prize can achieve this. The New Shape Prize is the first ever attempt to invite the whole world to come up with the best possible innovative ideas of how we can find a new world order. A global governance pathway that will enable us to transition into a desired future, where we avoid potentially global catastrophic risks, ranging from the risk of nuclear war, pandemics, inequality, all the way down to climate system collapse. In May 2018, the New Shape Forum is held in Stockholm. 3 winning proposals are chosen. Among them are global governance and the emergence of global institutions for the 21st century by Artur Dahl, Maya Groff, and Augusto Lopez Claros. They are all followers of the Baha'i faith. The central theme of this religion is that humanity is one single race and that the day has come for its unification in one global society. Their proposal is presented at the Paris Peace Forum in November 2018, a newly founded annual gathering with world leaders that focus on improving global governance. Paris Peace Forum was founded by Emmanuel Macron and is led by former OECD Secretary General Angelo Gurria. Support comes from UNESCO, European Commission, the World Bank, IMF, Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie Corporation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Open Society, and corporations like Microsoft, Amazon, and TikTok. The stage was set and big changes were at the horizon. Johan Rockström assumed his position as co-director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research in Germany in late 2018. In September 2019, United Nations Secretary General calls for all sectors to mobilize for the decade of action. It is followed by a triggering event that had been prophesied by Paul Raskin's The Great Transition Initiative. On March 11, 2020, WHO declares a global health emergency. 3 months later, the Great Reset is declared by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The Great Reset is a welcome recognition, but this human tragedy must be a wake-up call. We must build more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economies and societies that are more resilient in the face of pandemics, climate change, and many other global changes we face. It is a voice of a puppet. In September 2020, an answer to the Great Reset is declared by the United Nations at the Global Governance Forum with the slogan, "Designing a roadmap to the future we want, the UN we need." At the forum, 20 projects to further the agenda is presented. Among them are Global Challenges Foundation's Climate Governance Commission, convened by Maja Groff, with Artur Dahl and Augusto Lopez as experts. Their mission is to develop new models of global governance solutions. They released their first interim report governing our climate future in 2021 with suggestions on how to reform the global governance system. The Commission, chaired by Mary Robinson, Maria Espinosa and Johan Rockström, also consists of members such as the Club of Rome co-president Sandrine Dixon de Cleve and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Ellen is also the co-chair for the high-level advisory board on effective multilateralism, together with former Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. A panel sponsored by Global Challenge Foundation as well as the Baha'i International Community. This high-level board had been created by Antonio Guterres with a task to support our common agenda and the Summit of the Future and develop proposals on how governance improvements could be achieved. One of the proposals in our common agenda is the setup of an emergency platform to manage complex global shocks if an emergency is declared. During the United Nations General Assembly in September 2023, the Climate Governance Commission issues a policy paper called Governing Our Planetary Emergency. Among the supporters, we find the Rockefeller Foundation. They proclaim that the world faces a deepening planetary emergency and is in a reckless path toward catastrophic climate change, having already overstepped 6 of 9 scientifically identified planetary boundaries. A system-wide approach to solving the climate crisis is required now, ensuring reliable climate and planetary boundary governance for the Earth as a whole. They state that what is lacking is renewed and courageous top-down leadership within all levels of government, combined with generalized bottom-up citizen pressure and engagement to catalyze fundamental transformations. To set the plan in motion, they want the UN General Assembly to declare a global planetary emergency at the 2024 Summit of the Future. They also want to convene an international planetary emergency platform and develop a planetary emergency plan for urgent, coordinated action. An international panel on planetary boundaries is proposed to communicate scientific findings and policy matters to relevant national and international governance bodies and the general public, as well as a sub-panel on Earth system risk to provide ongoing monitoring of the status of Earth systems' vital functions. They should inform governmental decision-making on an ongoing basis, all for the sake of safeguarding the planet. The new report will be released during COP28 in Dubai. But everything has already been prepared in the background. The ambitious project Global Commons Alliance was launched in 2019. The project is coordinated by the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, with World Economic Forum, the Club of Rome, and the United Nations Global Environmental Facility among its 70 partners, with funding from, among others, the Global Challenges Foundation. It's a project funded by the ultra-rich. Their mission is to mobilize citizens, companies, cities, and countries to accelerate systems change and become better guardians of the global commons. To achieve this, we have constructed a five-part formula for systems transformation. 1. The Earth Commission determines the science. 2. The Science-Based Target Network sets the targets. 3. The Earth Headquarters communicates the science. 4. The Systems Change Lab monitors and accelerates the changes deemed necessary. And 5. The Accountability Accelerator holds companies, cities, and countries accountable. The Earth Commission, that claims to be the first holistic attempt to scientifically define and quantify a safe and just corridor for people and planet, is co-chaired by Johan Rockström. The concept is built on his planetary boundaries framework. We have to be steered and managed in order to not overstep our boundaries. Here is Johan with the steering wheel at his TED Talk, 10 years to transform the future of humanity, aired in October 2020. The Earth Commission is hosted by Future Earth, with its office in the Swedish Royal Academy of Sciences at Frescati in Stockholm, the home of the Bayer Institute. By the terms of Alfred Nobel's will, the Royal Academy awards the Nobel Prizes in Physics and Chemistry since 1901. Svante Arrhenius received the prize in 1903. The project coordinator, Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, is chaired by Valerie Rockefeller. She said in a 2022 interview with Spears magazine that, "I happen to believe we need deep systemic change because we do have such inherent racism, homophobia, and patriarchy baked into our systems. But we need to reform those systems. I would not say overthrow, but reform, to really get to a point of stakeholder capitalism." She is, of course, referring to Klaus Schwab's vision of the world. But her views have more familiar origins. Valerie Rockefeller is the granddaughter of Population Council founder John D. Rockefeller III. She has inherited the Rockefeller brothers' 75-year-old population control agenda. Another key financier is billionaire André Hoffman from Mava Foundation, vice chair of the pharmaceutical company Hoffman La Roche, member of the Club of Rome, and a World Economic Forum trustee. He is also the honorary chair of the Global Footprint Network that calculates our individual footprints and the Earth Overshoot Day. When he received the David Rockefeller Bridging Leadership Award in 2022 by Valerie's aunt Peggy Dulano from Synergos, he told a story that illustrates the views of the ultra-rich. He said, quote, "Planet Earth goes on holiday. Planet Earth has had enough. planet Earth travels out into the cosmos. It crosses another planet. The other planet says, "Hey, how are you?" And the planet Earth replies, "I got a bad case of Homo sapiens." I am sure he doesn't consider himself a part of a disease. He is one of the doctors delivering the cure. Antonio Guterres proclaimed in March that we have never been equipped to solve the climate challenge, better equipped to solve the climate challenge. But we must move into warp speed climate action now. And if this wasn't enough, on October 25th, the British Medical Journal published an editorial demanding that the climate crisis must be treated as a global health emergency. Quote, over 200 health journals call on the United Nations, political leaders and health professionals to recognize that climate change and biodiversity loss are one indivisible crisis and must be tackled together to preserve health and avoid catastrophe. This overall environmental crisis is now so severe as to be a global health emergency. WHO should declare the indivisible and nature crisis as a global health emergency. Hence, we call for the WHO to make this declaration before or at the 77th World Health Assembly in May 2024. All for one world, one health, and one leader. This is a quote that Redacted News mentioned in their 17 November episode, Documents Reveal WHO Caught Lying About Pandemic Treaty. Quote, every collectivist revolution rides in on a Trojan horse of emergency. It was the tactic of Lenin, Hitler and Mussolini. In the collectivist sweep over a dozen minor countries of Europe, it was the cry of men striving to get on horseback. An emergency became the justification of the subsequent steps. This technique of creating emergency is the greatest achievement that demagoguery attains. The planetary guardians are coming to our rescue. Or is it the angel of death? We better beware. You can read the fascinating background in Rockefeller controlling the game, published in English, French, Polish and Swedish. The new international edition will be available early 2024. My latest articles can be found on my Substack. Support my work by becoming a paid subscriber. Thank you.